Step away from the vehicle. Officer, this is my car. A pause. One beat too long. People like you don't drive cars like this. 40 phones went up. 40 people watched. Not one moved. The registration card was on the ground. Her name. The plate. Everything. Right there between his feet. He looked down, he saw it. 3 seconds his boot moved. Slow. Deliberate. Gone. That doesn't prove anything. Someone laughed. She had heart surgery 6 days ago. Every piece of paper said this car was hers. None of it mattered. Hands behind your back. I have stitches, please. He took her wrist anyway. The cuffs closed. Too tight. Blood at her wrist. 30,000 strangers went silent. The card was still under the car. Nobody moved. By 3 o'clock that Tuesday afternoon, Rose May Caldwell would be on her knees in a parking lot, hands cuffed behind her back, bleeding from her wrist, with 30,000 strangers watching through their phone screens, and not one of them stepping forward. She was 68 years old. She had survived 40 years of night shifts, 1 open heart surgery, and burying the man she loved. She had not survived a Tuesday afternoon at the grocery store. Not without a fight. But the morning had started gently. The way mornings do when they don't yet know what they're becoming. She signed her discharge papers at 7:49. The nurse at the desk was young, with a round face, and the exhaustion of someone in a 12-hour night shift. She watched Rose sign and said, "You sure you don't want us to call someone, honey?" "I'm sure," the doctor said. I know what the doctor said, not sharp. The nurse stopped talking. Rose picked up her purse, settled the strap over her shoulder, and walked toward the exit, slow, deliberate, her cane clicking against the linoleum with each step, not because she feared falling, because 6 days ago a surgeon had opened her chest and put her back together, and she was still learning how all the pieces held. The automatic doors slid open. August heat pressed in from every direction at once. She stood in it for a moment. Let it settle over her skin the way sunlight does after days of fluorescent light and paper gowns, and the particular smell of a place where people go when something has gone wrong. 6 days inside. She was out now. She was going to buy peaches. Earl Caldwell had loved peaches the way certain men love baseball. Completely, without apology, like the feeling needed no defense. Every August, he drove to the farm stand on Route 9 and came home with a paper bag so full it strained at the bottom. He ate them over the kitchen sink, juice running down his wrist, eyes closed. Earl had been gone 4 years now, 4 summers without him at that sink. Tomorrow would have been their anniversary, 42 years. Rose still bought peaches every August, not because it filled the space, not because it made anything easier. She bought them because she wanted him to know she still remembered, that she had not moved on in the way people said you were supposed to move on, that she was still here, still his, still buying peaches in the last week of August because that was when they were best and he had taught her that. She walked to the car. The Mercedes sat where she had left it 2 days before her surgery. Silver, clean-lined, unhurried in the morning sun. Not a scratch on it, because Rose took care of what she had. That was simply who she was. James had given her the car on the day he made chief. Not a week later to celebrate, the day of. He had driven it straight from the ceremony, still in his dress uniform with the silver on his collar, and stood on her porch on Pearl Street, holding the keys out like they were something ceremonial. She had looked at the keys, then at the car, then at him. James Caldwell cost more than this house. No, it doesn't. It costs more than I have ever seen gathered in one place. Mama. He said her name the way he always did when he needed her to stop arguing and just listen. Low, steady. You cleaned other people's floors for 40 years, Steve. You deserve to drive something that makes people look twice. I don't need people looking at me. That, he said, is exactly why you need it. She had not understood him right then. Not fully. She understood it now. She pressed the key fob. The locks released with a soft sound. She opened the door and lowered herself in, with one hand on the frame. Careful with her chest, always careful, settled into the seat, adjusted the mirror. Market was 12 minutes away. She would buy peaches, drive home, put them in the blue bowl on the kitchen table the way Earl always did. Tomorrow she would sit by the window and eat one and think about him. Simple plan. She pulled out of the hospital lot and drove toward the market. Sandra Pruitt saw the car before she saw the woman. She was sitting in her gray SUV in the Hargrove Market lot, parked in the shade near the entrance. She had come for dinner things and then sat in her car for 15 minutes because she wasn't ready to go inside yet. Sandra did that sometimes. Sat in parked cars. It was the one place nobody needed anything from her. She was watching the entrance when the silver Mercedes turned in. Clean car, the kind that announced itself without effort, and then the driver's door opened and Sandra saw who was getting out. Rose May Caldwell, her neighbor, 3 houses down on Pearl Street, the woman with the garden that grew too tall, and the visitors who came too often, and the refusal to make herself small, sir, in any way Sandra had ever been able to identify. Rose got out slowly. Kane first, then us straightened up,
adjusted her cardiac
faded blue, soft from washing, reached back into the car for her purse. Orthopedic shoes, August heat, a car that had no business belonging to a woman who looked like that. That was the thought. Exactly that thought, arriving fully formed. It has no business. Sandra sat with it, turned it over. Here is what you need to understand about Sandra Pruitt. The thing she would never tell anyone. Not her sister, not the friends she lunched with on Thursdays, not the ceiling at 3 in the morning when it surfaced anyway. 2 years ago, Sandra's son Tyler had come home drunk, 19 years old. Not so drunk he couldn't drive, he had decided. Drunk up, the decision was the problem. Sandra had not heard him take the car. Did not know until weeks later. Through a sideways conversation, Tyler mentioning it like it wasn't important, that Rose had been awake, had seen Tyler's car weaving at the end of the block, had walked outside in the dark, flagged him down, taken the keys from a boy too far gone to argue, called a cab from the corner, stayed until he was inside. Never said a word to Sandra about it. Sandra had stood in her kitchen and felt something she could not name cleanly, some small sour and sour. She should have gone to Rose's door that same day. She knew that. She should have knocked and said, whatever you say was someone has done something for your child that you could not dug yourself. She didn't go. Later became a week. A week became a month. A month became never. The longer she didn't go, the bigger the thing she hadn't done became. And the bigger it became, the harder it was to look at Rose Caldwell without feeling it. That sourness. That tight thing with no clean name. Shame does this when you don't let it out. It curdles into something that looks like resentment and acts like it. So Sandra sat in her car that Tuesday morning and watched Rose Caldwell cross the lot with her cane and her faded cardigan and her silicities, and something shifted in her chest. She thought, that car doesn't belong to a woman like that. She lifted her phone, dialed 911. Her voice was calm when the dispatcher answered. Rehearsed without knowing she had rehearsed it. I want to report a theft in progress at Hargrove Market. There's a black woman, older, 60s. I saw her breaking into a silver Mercedes. She doesn't belong with a car like that. I think she might be armed. Every word a choice. Not the dispatcher Aslingstendra gave it, did. The call lasted 2 minutes. She ended it, but set the phone on the passenger seat. She sat very still for a moment. Then she got out and walked into the market to pick up something for dinner. 2 miles away, Officer Ryan Holt heard the call through his radio. He was in his patrol car at a gas station, engine running, finishing a coffee gone cold 20 minutes ago. The radio said, possible vehicle theft, Hargrove Market. Female suspect, black elderly, possibly armed. Ryan set down the coffee. 29 years old, 3 years on the force. Not long, but long enough to have developed opinions about calls, about how they went, about what they usually meant. The word armed changed the shape of things. Here is what you need to understand about Ryan Holt. He was not a man who woke up intending harm to anyone. He had a wife, 2 kids, a boy of 4 named Owen and a girl of 7, who drew pictures of him in his uniform and taped them to the refrigerator with much tape. Always too much tape. He loved his family. He wanted to do his job well. But 3 weeks before, Sergeant Brenda Fulton had stood him up in front of the full shift briefing and taken him apart. Not loudly. Fulton didn't need volume to flatten someone. She had gone through his incident report from a traffic stop, sentence by sentence, and explained to the assembled room exactly where his judgment had failed. He had not slept a full night since. He needed this call to go right. There was one more thing, small in itself, the way small things are before they become something else entirely. His radio had been cutting out since the start of his shift. A fault on certain channels, intermittent dropouts. He had known about it from the moment he'd clocked in. He had not reported it because reporting meant paperwork and a conversation with the equipment sergeant and possibly told a reassignment, and he did not want any of those things today. He would work around it. Ha pulled out of the gas station and pressed the accelerator down. Dion Harper was 23 years old. He drove a delivery van, white, plain, company logo on the side, and spent his days moving electronics from one address to another. He didn't mind the work. It was straightforward. You knew what you were doing and then whether you'd done it. He was parked at the curb outside Varve Grove Market that morning, waiting on a confirmation text, eating a sandwich, radio on. His company frequency, well, mostly. But other suggestions bled through sometimes. Police bands occasionally. He caught something. A call. Hargrove Market. He looked up from the sandwich. Across the lot, an older woman was carrying a paper bag toward a silver car. Moving. Slowly. Clicking. She opened the rear door. Set the bag inside. Straightened with some effort. She looked like someone's grandmother coming home from the grocery store. Dion thought about his own grandmother, Eunice Harper, 71 years old. Took the city bus to the market on Wednesdays and Saturdays every week, walked 5 blocks with her bags, never asked anyone to carry them. If someone had called the police on Eunice Harper, he didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. He put the sandwich down, got out of the van, leaned against the side of it, arms loose, and watched. He didn't have a plan. He just was not going to sit in the van and eat a sandwich while whatever was coming came. Ryan pulled into the lot fast, tires catching against the asphalt. He angled the patrol car, practiced, deliberate, the door as a partial shield, and stepped out before the engine finished settling. Hand on the holster. Not on the weapon, on the holster. He scanned the lot, somber silver Mercedes, woman at the open rear door. Older, cane, fade-hooded cardigan. Step away from the vehicle. Rose turned. She did not startle, did not raise her hands immediately. She looked at him with an expression that was not fear and not anger. Something steadier than both, the kind of steadiness that comes from being looked at wrong enough times to develop a permanent ballast against it. "Officer," she said, "this is my car. Step away from the vehicle right now." Of course. She moved the cane forward one careful step away from the car. "I have my registration in my purse. If you'll allow me, do not reach for anything. I'm trying to show you." "I said do not reach." She stopped. Hand near the strap of her purse. Then she let it drop. The peaches sat in their paper bag on the rear seat. Small and gold and entirely indifferent to all of this. "I was loading my groceries," she said. "I came from the hospital this morning. I had heart surgery 6 days ago. If you'll let me show you my registration." "Whose car is this?" "Mine. I've had it 2 years. A pause. Too long. Right. And I'm the mayor." Something moved through the gathering crowd, not quite a sound, a shift in weight, a collective inhale. Rose looked at him, still steady, still not afraid, or if she was, it lived somewhere deep enough that it hadn't reached her face. "My name is Rose May Caldwell," she said. "The car is registered to me. The address on the registration is 4 Pearl Street. Run the plate. That will tell you everything in 30 seconds. Ryan did not run the plate. His radio was the tool for that, but his radio had been dropping signals since morning, and he had not reported the fault. Reaching for it now. In front of this crowd, in front of these phones, and having it crackle and fail in front of an audience. He was not going to do that. Instead, he walked around her, looked at the car, looked at her. A silver Mercedes, polished, not a scratch on it. A woman in orthopedic shoes and a faded blue cardigan. His mind had decided. That was the truth of it, though he would not know how to say so for months. He had trusted with some discretion and built a picture from it, and the picture's complete before he stepped out of his car. Everything he was seeing now, he was filtering through something he had already concluded. The gap between the car and the woman, in his mind, was the only evidence he thought he needed. He keyed his shoulder radio. It crackled. He lowered his hand. Rose said quietly. Ryan looked at her. Son, she said, I am 68 years old. I came straight from the hospital this morning. The only things in this bag are peaches and my heart medication. I am not your son. No, she said, you're not. Just those words. But the way she said them. He kicked her cane, not a violent kick, a sharp sideways movement of his foot, and the cane skittered across the asphalt and spun under the neighboring car, 3 feet away, four out of reach. Rose's left with it. She caught herself on the hood, with one palm flat against the warm metal, bent forward. A breath went out of her. Not a cry, just a breath, the kind that gets forced out before you decide not to look at all, please. Her voice had dropped. I had surgery 6 days ago. I cannot stand for long without the cane. Hands on the hood. Spread your feet. Officer. Hands. On the hood. She put both palms flat on the metal. It was burning. She bowed her head. A strand of gray hair fell across her face. At the edge of the lot, Dion stepped forward. 1 step. Hey, not loud. Direct. She's older, man. Just check her ID. That takes 10 seconds. Ryan turned his head slowly. Stay back or you're next. Mind your business. Dion stopped. He didn't leave, but he didn't come closer. He raised his phone instead, pressed less live. The counter started. 40 viewers. Then 60, then 112. Near the market entrance, Sandra Pruitt stood with a small plastic basket over her arm. She had come back outside. She told herself she was looking for her car keys. She was not looking for her car keys. She was watching. A second patrol car arrived. Officer Dana Reeves stepped out. 6 years old. Months on the force. She had quick eyes that took in a scene fast. She saw an older woman bent over the hood of a silver car, both palms flat on hot metal. A cane lying abandoned on the asphalt, far out of reach. A man with his phone raised at the lot's edge. Ryan Holt standing with his jaw set, his posture saying the matter was resolved. Dana opened her mouth, looked at Ryan's expression, closed it. She walked to a position near the crowd, hands on her belt, eyes forward. She became one more person watching. And that was the choice, that small and quiet nothing of a choice, that she would return to at 2 in the morning for a long time after. Rose's purse slid off her shoulder during Ryan's circling examination of the vehicle. It hit the pavement and things scattered. A lipstick, a prescriptions bottle from Hargrove County Hospital, dated 6 days prior, a folded tissue. And there, face up on the asphalt, in plain view, needing nothing more than a pair of eyes to read it, a laminated registration card. Rose May Caldwell, 4 Pearl Street, make, model, plate number. All of it. Matching the woman, matching the car, lying on the ground between them like a fact that refused to be ignored. Dion saw it first. Yo, loud enough to carry. Her name's right there. The papers are on the ground, man. You don't even have to look hard. A murmur moved through the crowd, agreement. Unease finding its first shape. Ryan looked down. He saw it 1 second, 2, 3. That was the moment. The exact moment where the entire afternoon could have turned. Where he could have crouched down and picked it up and read it and felt that long, cold, clarifying drop in the stomach that comes when a person realizes they have made a mistake. Where he could have stood back up and said something that started with, I'm sorry. He reached out his foot and pushed the card under the car, into the shadow beneath the chassis. Gone. That doesn't prove anything, he said. People steal the registration right along with the car. The murmur in the crowd changed pitch. Most of it was discomfort. Some of it, and this was the part that landed deepest, the part that bruised, was something close to amusement. A bright, careless laugh from somewhere in the back. The kind that happens when people forget there is a person at the center of what they are watching. Rose heard that laugh. She in 1965. 7 years old, her mother's hand around hers, feet on the ground, because her mother said, "You put your feet on the ground and you go." She had been turned away from lunch counters and talked over in rooms and passed on sidewalks by people whose eyes through her like she wasn't there. She had cleaned the marble lobbies of downtown buildings for 22 years. Night shift. Service entrance, invisible. She had spent 68 years proving, in small ways and large ones, and every way available to her, that she existed and mattered and belonged. And here, in a sunny parking lot, a man had decided in 5 minutes that none of it counted for anything. "You think a woman like me can't own a car like this?" she said. Ryan looked at her. What came out next was not tactical, not professional, just the thing inside him, unguarded for a moment. "I think that car costs more than you'll see in your whole life." Rose was quiet for a moment. "You don't know my life," she said. "I know your type." She turned those words over slowly. "My type," she said. "What type is that?" He didn't answer. He took her by the arm and turned her to face the crowd. Phones up everywhere now. 8, 9, 12, small screens trained on her. "You're being detained for suspected vehicle theft. Hands behind your back." "I have stitches. Slow, steady, please. Not behind my back." He took her wrist anyway, pulled it back and down. The motion bent her forward over the hood and a sound came out of her. Not a cry, just a breath forced out by pain, sharp and involuntary and real. "Please," she said. "You're hurting me. Stop resisting. I can't move that fast. Stop resisting." Louder this time, for the cameras, for the crowd. She had not resisted. There was no version of those 40 minutes in which she had. But she had been alive long enough to know what those two words do when they land on a recording. How they plant something. How something planted is enough. The first cuff closed. The second snapped shut too tight, biting into the thin skin over the wrist bone. She looked down as far as she could. A thin line of red welling up against the silver metal. She closed her eyes. The crowd numbered 40 now. 40 phones, 40 pairs of eyes. The shape of the crowd was the shape crowds always take around something wrong. Close enough to see, far enough to stay clean. Filming because felt like doing something. Standing because standing together felt like witness. It wasn't the same thing. But it felt enough like it to keep them where they were. Dion Harper was the only one who had spoken. The only one who had stepped forward. He was 23 years old, and his hands were shaking, and he was still there. The Tiver counter read 400 and climbing fast. Dana Reeves stood at the scene's edge. She could see the white edge of the registration card from where she stood, just visible in the shadow under the car. She knew what it said without reading it. She put her hands on her belt. She did not move. Near the entrance, Sandra Pruitt was not holding her shopping basket anymore. She had set it on the sidewalk at some point without noticing. She was watching with her arms folded, and her face had gone very still. The stillness of someone watching a thing become larger than what they had imagined when they started it. She had expected a brief conversation, a check, some paperwork, the old woman explaining herself and the officer nodding and everyone going home. She had expected the cane on the ground. She had not expected the sound Rose had made. She had not expected the blood. Sandra looked at the thin red line on Rose's wrist. Something moved through her chest. She did not look at it directly. She unfolded her arms, folded them again, looked away. They put Rose in the back of the patrol car. "Watch your head," Ryan said, and gave her no time to. The door closed. Inside, the air was thick and immediate. The vehicle had been sitting in direct August sun since morning. It pressed against her from every surface. She felt it against her chest, where the incision was. Felt it in her wrists, still cuffed behind her, the metal already burning. She leaned her cheek against the window. The glass was hot, too. "Please," she said, not loud, into the glass. "It's too hot, my heart." Ryan stood with his back to the car, facing the crowd. He did not turn. Dana looked at the car, then at Ryan. She opened her mouth, closed it. The moment passed. She would think about that passing for a long time afterward, the way you think about a door you could have opened and didn't. Inside the car, Rose was alone with the heat and her own heartbeat. She had been a practical woman her whole life. Not cold. Practical in the way life makes you practical when you cannot afford otherwise. When Earl died, she had cried for 3 days, and on the fourth day, she got up, made coffee, called the bank, and started learning what it meant to do everything alone. She did not dwell on things she could not act on. But in that car, with the heat pressing in from every direction, her hands behind her back, blood drying on her wrist, the incisions across her chest pulling with each breath, she let herself feel it. Not the fear, not the pain. Those were manageable. The humiliation. That was the one she had to sit with, the one that would not be made practical. 68 years old. She had made those marble floors shine. She had raised a son alone on night shift wages. She had watched that son grow into a man who ran the very department, treating her like this. She had buried a husband, and kept a house, and kept her word, and kept her dignity through every indignity the world had found to offer. And she was sitting in the back of a hot car with her hands behind her back, because a neighbor who could not look her in the eye had picked up a phone. She breathed through it. In, out. Careful. The surgeons had said no stress on the heart. She almost laughed. She thought about Dr. Pembroke, young man, steady hands, formerly kind, who had stopped in her doorway on the last morning of her stay and said, "Mrs. Caldwell, I want you to know, you are one of the strongest patients I have had." She had said, "Thank you, doctor." One of the strongest. She breathed, in, out. Her heartbeat was not right, not racing, irregular. The rheumatologist had warned her could be triggered by heat, exertion, or stress. She had all three in concentrated form. She pressed her cheek hard against the glass. She thought about Earl. She did this when she needed to locate herself, when things got too large, and she seated the center of something solid. Earl at the kitchen sink, eyes closed, juice on his wrist. Earl reaching across the kitchen table for her hand for no reason, just to hold it. Just because it was there. Earl in the hospital the last time, smaller than she had ever seen him, saying, "Rose, you're going to be fine without me." She had said, "I know." She had not known. But he needed to hear it, and she had always done what needed doing. She straightened her back as much as she could, with her hands pinned behind her. She lifted her head. She looked out the window at the parking lot, saw Dion Harper, still standing, phone still raised. She thought, that young man is braver than he knows. She thought about 10 digits. A number she knew better than her own birthday, better than Earl's shoe size, better than the combination to the lockbox in the hall closet. "Officer." Louder this time. Clear. "I would like to make a phone call." No response. "I know my rights. I am owed one phone call, and I want to make it now." Nothing. "If something happens to me in this vehicle," she said, her voice steady as anything. "Every person out there is watching you deny medical care to a woman who had heart surgery 6 days ago. Look at the cameras, count them." A pause. "Look at how many there are." The heat pressed down. Her chest was tight. She breathed through it, one breath at a time. Dana Reeves crossed the lot. She reached the car and opened the door. Outside air, barely cooler, but moving, came in. Dana crouched to Rose's level. She had kind eyes. That was the first thing. Whatever else had happened in this parking lot, whatever choices Dana had made or failed to make, she had kind eyes, and she was here now, with the door open and the air moving. "Ma'am," Dana said quietly. "Is there someone I can call?" "Family." Rose looked at her. What was the number? 10 digits. Slow and certain. The way you say something you've said 10,000. Dana dialed on her own phone, held it up to Rose's ear, leaning close because Rose's hands were still behind her. It rang once. Behind them, Ryan made a sound, dismissive, impatient. Dana did not look back. It rang twice. The live counter on Dion's phone read 840, 3 times. And then the line connected. A man's voice, warm and occupied, the voice of someone in the middle of a full afternoon. "Caldwell." Rose May Caldwell closed her eyes. "James," she said, and her voice, which had held steady through the cane and the cuffs and the heat and the blood and the 40 people filming from a safe distance, broke. Just at the edges. Just enough to be real. "Baby, it's your mother. I need you to come." Dana pulled back slowly. She looked at the contact name on the screen of her own phone. Her face went through several things in quick succession. She stood, turned toward Reinhold. Ryan. Her voice came out strange, careful in a way that had nothing to do with composure. What's her last name? But Ryan's wasn't listening to her. He was looking at the far end of the parking lot, where 3 vehicles had turned in off the main road, moving fast.
Close for irons.
No lights, no announcement of any kind. When powerful people don't need noise to clear a path, that is a specific kind of power. The cars stopped in a tight arc. Doors open. Officers stepped out. Not responding to the scene, positioning around it, fanning out the way people move when they are making room for the most important person present. A lead-car, a man stepped out, tall, broad through the shoulders. Dress uniform, pressed silver on the collar. His face carried the focused stillness of someone who has been told something and must see it with his own eyes before he allows himself to respond. He scanned the lot once. The cane under the neighboring car, the peaches on the asphalt, the prescription bottle near the drain, the patrol car with its rear door open. Then he saw her, and the stillness in his face, the controlled, practiced stillness built across 20 years of holding difficult rooms together, came apart, gradually. The way a load-bearing wall sounds before it goes. He saw the blood on her wrist. He ran. Chief James Caldwell crossed that parking lot in a few long strides and dropped straight to both knees on the hot asphalt beside his mother. The silver on a collar caught the afternoon light. He took her face in both hands. Mom. The word cracked down the middle, small. Not the chief's voice, a son's voice. Mom. I'm here. James, she breathed. You came. Of course I came. His voice shook just slightly, but enough. Who did this? Who put these on you? He reached behind her without waiting for an answer, found the cuffs. His hands stopped on them. Too tight! He could feel the swelling under the steel without looking, could see the blood at her wrist. One word, no raised voice, no inflection. Key. He did not need anything else. Whose prisoner is this? I want the key. Now. Dana moved first. She crossed to him and worked the lock, her hands not entirely steady. The cuffs came free. James held his mother's hands, looked at the marks left behind, the deep red lines, the bruising already rising, the blood, and the parking lot went completely, wholly silent. Every phone, every pair of eyes, every person who had stood at a circumference distance for 40 minutes. 30,000 people watching on Dion Harper's live stream went silent. Ryan Holt stood 10 feet away. And for the first time since he had turned into this parking lot with his mind already made up, he understood fully, without any remaining argument, what he had done. Ryan Holt did not move. He stood 10 feet from the chief of police, and his mind was working fast and arriving nowhere useful. 3 years on the force, training rooms, difficult scenarios, protocols for escalating situations. Nobody had covered this. No procedure existed for the moment when the woman put in handcuffs turns out to be the mother of your feet. James Caldwell was still on his knees beside his mother. He had not looked at Ryan yet. The not looking was worse than if he had. It meant Ryan would be dealt with when James chose to deal with him. Not before. Not on Ryan's schedule. The crowd had gone still, not quiet. The ambient sounds of a city afternoon continued, cars on the road beyond, the electric hum of an August day. But the people had stopped moving. Phones still raised. Nobody narrating now. Nobody whispering to the person beside them. Who had not an inch to stop any of it, were now watching with absolute attention. Because this was the part they had not anticipated. The part that made everything that came before it real in a different register. Before any of what was happening now, before the 3 cars arrived without sirens, before Dana opened the car door, before the phone call, there had been an hour. An hour when 30,000 people were still just strangers, and the parking lot was still just a parking lot, and Rose May Caldwell was alone in the back of a patrol car with the heat and her own thoughts. Here is what that hour looked like. When Ryan first closed the door on Rose, the temperature inside had been immediate and total. The car had been sitting in direct sun since he started his shift. The air had no movement in any directions. It pressed against her chest, against the incision, against the irregular rhythm her heart had settled into. She sat straight,
Not because of pride alone at all.
because she had sat straight on the city bus at 5 in the morning for 22 years, and at kitchen tables where the word no came dressed as other words, and in waiting rooms of places that wanted her to leave before she had finished her business. Sitting straight was not a performance. It was just how she had been made by years of needing it, but her heart was not cooperating. The cardiologist had described it during her pre-discharge consultation, as a post-surgical irregularity, manageable under ordinary circumstances, aggravated by heat or stress or physical exertion. She had all three now, concentrated, she breathed, slow, deliberate, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the stitches pulled with each inhale. She closed her eyes, and the memories came the way they come when you stop moving. Not invited, just arriving, the way weather on arrives. 1965. Set her mother's hand around hers, grip firm without being tight, the grip of someone who expected you to keep up and knew you would. Downtown Hargrove. Her mother saying, "You put your feet on the ground and you go, Rosie. That's all. You just keep going." She had kept going for 61 years after that morning, 1977. She was 19, sitting across from a woman at an insurance office downtown who had looked at her resume, then at her face, then at the resume again, and said, "We're looking for someone who fits the culture of the team." Rose had gone home and applied at the county records office, where they hired her, and where she worked days for the next 8 years while cleaning floors at night. 1978. James was 12. She had come home at 2 in the morning and found him doing homework at the kitchen table with a flashlight because she had not been able to pay the electric bill that month. He had not said a word about it, just looked up and said, "Hi, Mama." She had gone to the bathroom and cried with the door closed and the tap running so he wouldn't hear. She had never cried in front of him. That was the one thing she kept for herself. 1979. James had just been accepted to the police academy. She had sat in this same kitchen on Pearl Street and felt something so enormous it had no single name, fear and pride tangled together as so completely she couldn't separate them. She had asked, "Are you sure?" He had said, "I want to be someone people can call." She had not argued. She just looked at her son and thought, "Of course you do. Of course that's exactly who you are." And now she was sitting in a hot car with her hands behind her back. And that was the chief of police. And not 1 year of any of it had protected her from this parking lot on this Tuesday afternoon. She was not angry at James. She was not angry at herself. She was not angry at the world for being the world. She was tired, a specific tiredness that had nothing to do with the surgery. The tiredness of a person who has proved the same thing over and over across 6 decades and still has to prove it again today, in handcuffs, bleeding from the wrist. She breathed through it. She thought, "They have never truly seen me, and I have always known that, and I am still here, still exactly myself." She opened her eyes. She thought about 10 digits. Dion Harper had been holding his phone up for 38 minutes. His shoulder burned. His feet ached from standing in one position on asphalt that gave nothing back. The sandwich was still in the van, half eaten. He was hungry and tired, and his hands had been shaking from go for most of the last half hour. The live counter read 19,000. He kept thinking someone else would do something, someone older, someone who knew the right words, someone with the right kind of authority, or the right kind of standing, or the right kind of whatever it was that made people act instead of watch. He had stepped forward, and Ryan had looked at him, and he had taken one step back, then stayed. That step back was the thing he would carry, not the footage, not the counter climbing toward 20,000, the one step back. He had not left. He told himself that mattered. He was working out whether it was enough. Ryan walked toward him. "Shut it off. Flat. Right now. This is a public lot." Dion kept his voice even. His hand was not even. Why? Say it again. I know. Dion held the phone where it was. "I'm not in private property, sir." Ryan stepped closer. the kind of step meant to communicate something without requiring words. Dion was 23 years old and not large, and had no badge and no protection and no plan beyond the one he was executing 1 second at a time. He took a breath. He kept the phone up. Ryan looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the other phones still raised around the lot. He did his arithmetic. He stepped back. Dion let the exhale out slowly, quietly. He did not let it.
Counter.
Read 21,000. Sergeant Brenda Fulton was eating lunch at a diner 2 miles away when the person in the booth behind her started watching something on their phone with the volume up. She glanced over, looked away, looked back. She recognized the patrol car number first, then the uniform. Then Ryan Holt's face when the camera angle shifted. She left 2 bills on the table and walked to her car. She called Ryan's number. He did not answer. She called Dana Reeves. Dana answered on the second ring, and her voice when she said hello told Fulton something was already moving. Fulton said 3 words, "Open the car." "Yes, man," they said. Fulton ended the call and drove. Dana Reeves crossed the lot without looking at Ryan. She had felt the wrongness from the moment she arrived. She had cataloged it, the cane, the registration card on the ground, the prescription bottle, the blood, and she had understood what she was looking at. She had looked at Ryan's expression and made a calculation. Junior officer, 8 months in. Wrong moment to push back on a senior who had already made his decision. She had folded. She was not going to fold again. She opened the car door. The heat that came out was significant. The inside of that car had been a closed oven for 40 minutes. She crouched to Roseau's level. Both Rose opened her eyes, looked at her, and Dana, under that gaze, felt the full weight of the last 40 minutes land on her at once. "Ma'am," Dana said. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. "Is there someone I can call?" "Family, yes," Rose said. "There is." "What's the number?" 10 digits, slow, clear. Dana dialed. Held the phone to Rose's ear, leaning close, because Rose's hands were still pinned behind her. The line rang once. Ryan said something behind them. Dana registered it as background noise and nothing more. It rang twice, 3 times. A man's voice answered, warm and occupied, the voice of someone in the middle of a full day. "Caldwell?" Rose closed her eyes. "James," she said, and the steadiness that had held through everything, through the cane and the hood and the cuffs and the heat, let something through. Just at the edges, just enough. "Baby, it's your mother. I need you to come." Dana straightened slowly. She looked at the contact name displayed on her own phone. Her face went through several things at once. She turned toward Ryan. Ryan. Strange voice. Careful in a way that had nothing to do with composure. "What's her last name?" Ryan was no longer listening to her. He was looking at the far end of the lot, where 3 vehicles had turned in off the main road without sirens or lights or any announcement at all. Moving in close formation, the way a convoy moves when the most important person inside it does not need to announce themselves. They stopped in a tight arc. Officers stepped out and moved around the perimeter, not responding to the scene, positioning around it, clearing space. From the lead car, a man emerged, tall, broad through the shoulders, dress, uniform, silver on the collar, face holding the focused stillness of a man who has been told something and must see it for himself before he responds. He scanned the lot once. Cane under the neighboring car, peaches on the ground, prescription bottle near the storm drain, patrol car with its rear door open. He saw Rose, and the stillness in his face came apart. Gradually, the way a load-bearing wall sounds before it gives. He saw the blood on her wrist. He ran. James dropped to both knees beside his mother in a single motion, a body doing what it had decided before the mind finished the thought. He took her face in both hands. "Mom." The word came out, cracked, small and real. "Mom, I'm here." "James," she breathed his name. "You came." "Of course I came." His voice shook just slightly. "But enough. Who did this? Who put these on you?" He reached behind her, found the cuffs. His hand stopped. Too tight. He could feel the swelling under the steel. "Key." One word. No raised voice. Whose whisperer is this? The key. Now. Dana was already there. She worked the lock with hands that were not as tight, highly steady. The cuffs came away. James held his mother's hands, looked at the marks, the bruising, the blood. He held her hands, and the parking lot went completely silent. Every phone, every pair of eyes, every person who had stood at a comfortable distance for 40 minutes. 30,000 people on Dion's live stream. Rance Holt stood 10 feet away and understood, fully, without any remaining argument with himself, what he had done. James stood. He rose slowly, and the slowness was deliberate, and everyone in that lot understood what deliberateness from a man like this meant. He turned. He looked at Ryan Holt, not with immediate anger, with the quality of attention a person gives to something they are trying to fully understand before they responded to it. "Her name," James said, "is Rose May Caldwell." His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that requires an audience to lean in. "She raised me by herself, on Pearl Street, one bedroom. She worked the county records office during the day and cleaned office buildings downtown at night. She came home at 2 in the morning with her hands cracked, and she never let me see her tired." He paused. "That car." He turned and looked at the silver Mercedes, still sitting exactly where Rose had parked it. "I bought it for her, the day I made chief. I told her, 'You spent 40 years being invisible to people like that. Never again.'" He turned back to Ryan. Today she couldn't buy groceries without you deciding she was a criminal." Ryan's jaw tightened. He had been preparing something since James arrived. He had been telling himself that there was context, that there was a call, that there were procedures, and the call had driven him here, and the procedures had guided what he did next. "Sir," he said, "the call came in as armed theft. I was following what dispatch." "The call said older black female," James said. "Possibly armed." That was the description. "The caller said she was breaking into the vehicle. Was she breaking into anything when you arrived?" A silence. "Was she armed?" Another silence. "Did you run the plate?" Ryan opened his mouth. "My radio had a technical fault." "Did you run the plate, Officer Holt?" The silence this time was different. Final. "No, sir." James nodded once. The nod of a man confirming something he already knew. "There is a registration card under that car," he said. "Visible from here. An officer in this lot told me you kicked it there yourself." Ryan said nothing. The argument he had been constructing for the last 10 minutes had found its edge and stopped. James reached down without ceremony, pulled the card from the shadow under the car, held it up between them. "Rose May Caldwell," he read. 4 Pearl Street. The plate matches, the name matches. He tested it on the hood of the patrol car. "You stood over this for 20 minutes. Her name was under your feet the entire time." Ryan looked at the card, then at the ground, then at the card again. He had thought, coming into this parking lot, that he was someone who read situations accurately. He had thought that experience and instinct were the same as judgment. He was learning, in the most public way possible, in front of 30,000 people and counting, that they were not. "Hand your weapon and your badge to Sergeant Fulton," James said. "You are relieved of duty, effective now, pending a full investigation. Excessive force, unlawful detention, denial of medical care, deliberate obstruction of identifying evidence." Zane's hands moved to his belt. Slowly, the badge came off. He held it for a moment in his palm, this small piece of metal that had made him feel 45 minutes ago like the most important person in this parking lot. "Sir." His voice had gone rough. "I have 2 kids, a family. This is going to. My mother has a son," James said, flat. Quiet, a door closing. Ryan stopped. "You keep telling me what this cost you," James said. "You have not once said it to her." Ryan looked toward the ambulance that had just arrived at the lot's edge, at Rose being helped onto the gurney, at the paramedic wrapping her wrist, at the oxygen monitor on her finger. He had told himself things while she was in that car, words that functioned like armor. "She's performing. They always do this. It's a script." The armor was gone now. There was nothing between him and what he had done. She was 68 years old, and she had heart surgery 6 days ago, and she was sitting up straight on the edge of that gurney, back straight, after all of it. That was the part that hit him hardest. Not her condition, her posture. He placed the badge in Fulton's hand without looking at it. Fulton took it, said nothing. Everything she was not saying was visible on her face. Sergeant Fulton had arrived while James was speaking. She had driven herself, no escort. She walked through the remaining crowd and took up a position between James' left and shoulder, with the expression of some who had seen it in 22 years to be genuinely difficult to shock, and was shocked. She had the clip in a diner parking lot, and driven over telling herself there might be context, something the footage hadn't shown. She was no longer telling herself that. She looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at the ground. The paramedic, Greg Okafor, 16 years on his job, looked at the numbers on his monitor and did not like what he saw. He looked at Dana Reeves. How long was she restrained like this? 20 minutes, Dana said. Possibly more. Greg looked at Ryan. He did not speak. He had been doing this work long enough to know Wowens, and speaking would not add anything to what was already completely clear. He turned back to Rose. Mrs. Caldwell, your blood pressure is elevated and your heart rate is irregular. Given your recent procedure, I want to take you in. I know you're right, Rose said. Not arguing. Not performing acceptance, either. I can feel it's not right. No, ma'am. It isn't. She nodded. The paramedic and his partner began preparing the gurney. James came to her. He sat beside her in the open ambulance doorway, not standing over her. Beside her, the way he had sat beside her on the porch steps of Pearl Street when he was 10 years old and needed to be near her without saying so. She looked at his face, at what he was working not to let show. James, I'm here. Stop making that face. He almost laughed. What face? The where you're deciding it's going to happen to Ryan Holt. He was quiet. Don't rush it. Mama? Listen, if you go after him the hard way right now, the next Ryan Holt was it in the news and learns one thing. Don't get caught with the wrong woman. That's the entire lesson. He won't learn, don't do it. He'll learn, don't be seen doing it. James looked at his hands. I want you to build something, she said, simple and direct. Not break something. Build something that works for the next woman. The one who doesn't have your number, who sits in the back of a hot car with nobody to call and nothing to do but wait. What does it look like? Cameras that can't be turned off. A rule that says you check the identification before the cuffs go on, not after, before. Real training, not the kind where someone talks at officers for an afternoon and calls it done. The kind where they sit with people and actually have to look. She paused, breathed. The oxygen helped. And aboard. Real people, not officials, not lawyers, people who have been stopped, who can see the footage and demand real answers. James was listening the way he listened to things he was going to act on. Name it something official, she said. But I'll tell you what it's really for. The person who has nobody in their contacts who can change what happens next. That is who this is for. Not me. You're the reason it exists. I know that. But it needs to work long after I'm gone. That's the difference. She held his gaze. You understand. He did. Now go finish what needs finishing out there, she said. Then come back. I'm not going in alone. He stood, straightened his uniform, became the chief again, or wore it again. He had never been as blue. He squeezed her as Waits, careful of the bandage, walked back out. James walked directly to the market entrance where two of his officers were standing with Sandra Pruitt. Sandra had positioned herself with her chin up and her arms. After considerable deliberation, uncrossed, because she had decided crossed arms looked defensive on camera. She was still calculating, even now. I want to say, she began before James reached her, that I saw something suspicious and I reported it. That's what citizens are supposed to do. James stopped in front of her. He looked at her for a moment without speaking, long enough that the chin came down by a degree. You told dispatch she was armed, he said. I thought she might. Was she armed? Sandra's mouth opened. Stopped. You told dispatch she was breaking into the vehicle. I saw. Did you see her break into anything? 3 seconds of silence. The remaining crowd heard all three of them. You live 4 houses from this woman, James said. You have filed 3 complaints against her in 18 months. About her garden, about her visitors, about noise. He looked at her steadily. But This morning you watched her get out of a car she thought she didn't deserve to own, and you called the police and told them she had a weapon. I didn't say she definitely. You said you thought she might be armed. He did not raise his voice. A dispatcher hears that word, and the call becomes something different. You knew what you were doing when you said it. Sandra's carefully maintained composure was failing at the edges. I was trying to. 2 years ago, James said. This woman drove your son home when he was in no condition to be behind a wheel. She stayed with him until he was safe. She never asked you for anything in return. Sandra looked at him. Something moved through her face. Not guilt, exactly. Something rawer and less organized than guilt. And this morning, James said, you called the police and said she had a weapon. He said nothing further to Sandra Pruitt. He nodded to his officers. They walked her to a vehicle for processing. Sandra did not speak. She sat in the back of the car and looked at her own hands and said nothing at all. Dana Reeves had not moved far from the patrol car. She was standing near the rear bumper with her incident notebook open, writing in it. She had been going over the morning in a way she could not stop. 3 seconds. The registration card on the ground. Ryan's eyes on her. 3 seconds in which she had the information and she had the choice, and she had looked at the ground instead. She had opened the car door later. She had made the call. She knew that. She knew it had mattered, but it was not the same as the 3 seconds. She could not make it the same, no matter how she arranged it in her head. She was 26 years old. She had been on the force 8 months, and she had stood in a parking lot and watched a 68-year-old woman with a fresh surgical incision get bent over a hood in August heat, and she had said nothing. Not because she didn't know it was wrong, because she calculated that the cost of saying something was higher than the cost of silence. She would not be done with that calculation for a long time. When James passed her on his way back to the ambulance, he stopped. Officer Reeves. Yes, sir. He looked at her directly. Not unkindly, directly. You opened the car door. Yes, sir, you made the call. Yes, sir, you saw the registration card before it went under the car. A beat, 1 full second. Yes, sir, he held her gaze a moment longer. Not a verdict. A fact being acknowledged. We're going to talk, he said. Not today, when the investigation is further along. Yes, sir, he moved on. She exhaled slowly and carefully. Then she went back to the notebook. She was going to write it down exactly as it happened. All of it. The card. The 3 seconds. The decision she had made. She was not going to soften it or contextualize it into something more comfortable. It would go into the record because it belonged in the record. She had decided that in the ambulance doorway, when she watched Rose get helped onto the gurney, and she was not going to change her mind on the walk back to her car. Dion Harper had finally let his arm down. Not off. Just down. His shoulder had been burning for the last 20 minutes, and he could not hold it up any longer. He rested his elbow on the side mirror of the van and kept the lens facing outward. Thought about what it meant. 31,000 people watching because he had not gotten back in the van. Because he had stood in one spot on hot asphalt for an hour and held his phone up. He didn't feel heroic. He felt tired and hungry and a little shaky in the places where the adrenaline had been and was now leaving. James called stopped in front of him. Dion straightened. You're the one who stayed, James said. Yes, sir. You spoke when no one else did. Toth thought about the step back, about all the moments in the last hour where he had thought it, about walking away and hadn't. I tried to, he said. That's more than most people managed today. Dion looked at the crowd. Maybe 9 people left now, most having drifted back to their cars once the scene shifted from emergency to aftermath. 40 people at the height of it. One who had spoken. I kept waiting, Dion said, for someone older to do something. Someone who knew the right words. Someone with more standing than me. James looked at him for a moment. The people who marched in this county 60 years ago weren't waiting for someone with better words, he said. They were waiting for each other. He reached into his jacket, retrieved a card, held it out. I'm building something, he said. A oversight board with real authority over this department. I'd like to talk to you about being part of it. If you're willing, Dion took the card. Yes, sir, he said. I'm willing. He watched James walk back to the ambulance, watched the doors close, watched the ambulance pull out of the lot. He looked at the card in his hand again. Then he got back in the van, finished the sandwich that had been sitting there for an hour, and called Grumler. The ambulance pulled out of the Hargrove Market parking lot at 2:17 in the afternoon. The crowd that remained, 9 people now down from 40, watched it go. Then they looked at their phones. Then they drifted toward their cars. That is how these things end, usually. Not with resolution, with dispersal. The emergency over, the afternoon resuming, as though the interruption had been a weather event rather than a long chain of choices that 40 people had made or failed to make. Ryan Holt stood near Sergeant Fulton's vehicle. No badge, no weapon. Hands at his sides with nothing in them. Fulton was on her phone, back half-turned, working through the sequence of calls a situation like this required. She had not spoken to Ryan directly since taking the badge. She would. There was an order to these things, and she was working through it. Dion Harper had gone. The lot held his absence in the space where his van had been parked. Dana Reeves stood at the hood of her patrol car with her incident notebook, writing. She had been writing for 20 minutes. She crossed things out and rewrote them. She was not looking for the sentence that made her look better. She was just looking for the sentence that was true. Sandra Pruitt sat in the back of an officer's car, window cracked, looking at her own hands in her lap. The silver Mercedes remained in its spot, exactly where Rose had parked it. Rear door still slightly open. Paper bag on the back seat. Nobody had touched it. James rode in the front of the ambulance. He sat in the passenger seat and let the road move past and gave himself these 8 minutes to be Rose Caldwell's son before he had to be anything else. He had seen her wrists. He had spent 20 years building something careful and controlled material that hadn't been. Pearl Street, 1 bedroom. His mother's hands when she came home before dawn. He had pretended to sleep so she wouldn't know he waited up. But he had heard her at the kitchen sink, the water running, the small sound she made when she thought the apartment was sleeping. He had carried those sounds into every room he had walked into professionally, into every decision, into the job he had made himself into. And had done enough to cut her out of her car in August with her hands behind her back. She had asked him not to destroy Ryan Holt. Just the process, she had said. Build something that outlasts this afternoon, he thought. She is right. He thought, it is very hard to believe she is right now. He started building it anyway. In his head, on this road, with 8 minutes and the rest of his professional life ahead of him. At Hargrove County Hospital, Dr. Pembroke appeared within 5 minutes. He looked at Rose, at the bandage on her wrist, at the IV line, at the oxygen monitor on her finger, at James standing in the doorway in his dress uniform. Pembroke's face maintained its professional calm with visible effort. His jaw tightened by 1 degree and stayed there. Mrs. Caldwell, he said. We spoke this morning. We did. You told me to rest. You'll be resting now. 2 nights. I know, she said. I can feel that it's necessary. He looked at James. James looked back. The brief exchange of 2 men who understand something about what is at stake and do not require words for it. James stayed until Pembroke asked for the room. He kissed his mother's forehead, walked out to the corridor. He called Harriet Boone. Traveled far in the time it took to drive 8 miles. The clip of him kneeling beside his mother had reached 11 million views. The clip of him picking up the peaches was at 16. News crews outside the hospital. National pickup within the last 40 minutes. Here is what we're doing, James said. Internal affairs, county legal, union rep, tomorrow, 8 o'clock. And Officer Reeves. He paused. The investigation runs its full course. No shortcuts because of who she is to me. If the result means anything, it has to be real. And Holt, the process determines the outcome. My job is making sure the process is genuine. He ended the call, stood in the corridor. 2 minutes. He gave himself 2 minutes to feel the weight of the afternoon without managing it. Then he pushed off the wall and went back to work. At 4:15, Ryan Holt sat across from Sergeant Fulton in her office, no uniform, jeans and a gray shirt. He looked younger than 29. He looked like someone who had not slept a full night in 3 weeks and was not going to sleep tonight either. Fulton let the silence run. She was good she knew what it produced in people who had something to say. Ryan spoke first. "I made assumptions," he said, without being asked. "Before I got there, I had already decided what I was going to find." Fulton looked at him steadily. "But then you got there," she said, "and the registration card was on the ground." He nodded, "And you kicked it under the car." He said nothing. "That's not an assumption, Ryan. That's a choice." "I know." He looked at his hands, at what they had done in that parking lot and what they were doing now, which was nothing. The radio. "I should have reported the fault." "Yes." "It had Falcons," Fulton said. "None of this happens." He knew. He had known it from the moment James Caldwell crouched down and pulled that card from under the car. The 30 steps he hadn't taken. The simple step he had skipped it because he had already decided, and the step had felt like an obstacle to the decision he had already made. "What happens now?" he said. "Full investigation, your body camera. Officer Reeves's camera, Harper's footage, the 911 recording, every second." She held his gaze. "It will be thorough." And after, she looked at him. "That depends on what thorough finds." The thing he was actually asking, whether his career existed on the other side of this afternoon, whether his kids would grow up understanding what their father had done, she was not going to answer it. He was not going to ask it out loud. It sat between them anyway. Ryan used his name deliberately. He looked up. "You need to reckon with what you did."
It's not in this office.
"In yourself. Not apologize for it. Reckon with it." There's a meaningful difference between those two things. He thought he understood the difference. He was not entirely sure. "What changed?" Fulton said. "Between when you received the call and when you stepped out of your car." He thought about it, actually thought, rather than reaching for a prepared answer. "Nothing." "That's right," she said. "Nothing changed. Nothing new arrived. And that is the heart of the problem. The call confirmed a decision you had already made before the call." She stood. "Go home. Be with your family. Think about what nothing changed means. Not until you explain it to someone. It's till you genuinely understand it." At the door, he stopped. "Is she going to be okay?" Fulton looked at him for a moment. "She's stable," she said. "That's all I have." He nodded. He walked out into the ordinary parking lot of the county building and sat in his own car for a long time before he could make himself drive home. The hospital room was small and cool and pale. James sat there beside his mother's bed at 7 in the evening. She had slept for an hour, and he had sat beside her and worked from his phone, quietly, one thumb, the way you work when the room matters more than the work. When she woke, she looked at him in the chair. "You don't have to," she said. "I know." She looked at the window, evening arriving slowly, the light going amber, then softer. "Tell me what you're building," she said, as he put the phone away, turned the chair to face her. Cameras always as active during any public stop. No override at the officer's discretion. Mandatory identification check before any physical detention. Before, not during, not after. Before. He paused. "And a civilian board with genuine authority. Not advisory. Real authority to review footage and require answers. Independent of my office." "Who sits on it?" she said. I'll count appointment with term limits and a conflict of interest clause with actual teeth. "And real people on the board, not officials, not lawyers. People who have been stopped." "The young man with the van," she said. "Dion Harper. He stayed when everyone else found no reasons not to." She looked at James. "Start with him. Not because he filmed it, because he stayed. There's a difference." James wrote it down in his notebook. She watched his hand move across the page. "You still hold a pen with all 5 fingers," she said. "I learned from watching you. I know. I always held one wrong, too." They sat quietly for a while. The monitor kept its rhythm. Someone's passed in the hallway. Outside Hargrove County was becoming night. "Earl," Rose said. "I know. He would have liked today." James looked at her. Mama, not the handcuffs part. She was looking at the end of it. He would have watched your pictos tears. He would have been so proud he couldn't speak. She smiled, small and private. He always cried at things like that and then pretended he had something in his eye. James was quiet. He was right about most things, she said. Don't tell him I said that. I won't. He looked at her face in the low light. 68 years old, bandaged wrist, heart monitor, orthopedic shoes still on because she had not let anyone take them. I love you, Mama. I know you do. Now go home and sleep. You look terrible. I'm not leaving. James, I'm not leaving. He put his feet up on the edge of the bed frame the way he had when he was 12 and she was sick and he had refused to go to school. I'll be quiet. She looked at him, shook her head slowly. Fine, she said, but don't snore. I don't snore, Sam. You have snored since you were 4 years old. That is not James. He closed his mouth. She closed her eyes. The room went quiet. 2 days after the parking lot, Dana Reeves walked into Harriet Boone's office. She knocked on the open door. Boone looked up from her desk. I want something in the record, Dana said. She did not sit down. I saw the registration card on the ground before Ryan kicked it under the car. I saw it and I didn't say anything. I didn't pick it up. I didn't tell. I looked at the ground and I let it go. She paused. I want that documented, not contextualized, not explained, documented. Boone looked at her for a long moment. Her expression did not change. Sit down, Officer Reeves, she said. Dana sat. Boone picked up her pen. 6 weeks after the parking lot, the Hills County announced the called for answered. James stood at the podium in the county building. Harriet Boone to his left, the county attorney to his right. The first 12 members of the Civilian Oversight Board sat in the front row. Dion Harper was among them. Collared shirt, notebook open on his knee. The expression of someone who had decided this was work and intended to do it. James read the standard aloud in full. Kim is as active for every public interaction, no exceptions. Mandatory identification verification before any physical detention. A civilian board with authority. Real authority, not advisory, to review footage and demand accountability, staffed through a process independent of the chief's office. He answered questions for 40 minutes. A reporter asked, Chief Caldwell, do you believe the standard would have prevented what happened to your mother, Vother? Yes, he said. No qualification. If the camera requirement had an enforcement mechanism, we would have footage of the license plate check that didn't happen. The board would have had access within 48 hours. We would not have needed a live stream and 31,000 viewers for accountability to begin moving. Another reporter, does one's policy change the underlying? No, he said. It's a flaw. The underlying problem is what officers believe before they arrive at a scene. Policies doesn't change belief. Belief changes through sustained contact, through training that puts human beings in the same room over time and asks them to genuinely see each other. He paused. We're building that too. It's slower. It won't make a clean announcement, but it's part of this. He set his notes aside. My mother asked me to build something for the person who doesn't have her phone number, he said, who sits in a hot car with nobody to call. Every decision in this standard was made with that person in mind. The investigation concluded at 11 weeks. Ryan Holt lost his law enforcement certification. He could not work in that capacity again. Not in Hargrove County, not in the state. The findings: unlawful detentions, excessive use of restraint, failure to perform required identification verification, denial of medical care, and deliberate obstruction of identifying evidence. The last finding carried the most weight. In the way people talked about it and wrote about it after, they came back to the card. The deliberate kick. The 20 minutes with her name under his foot. People could not get past it. The investigation agreed they should not. Sandra Pruitt entered a plea on a lesser false report charge. Committee service, a fine, a suspended sentence. She moved out of Hargrove County 4 months after the plea, quietly and without forwarding her address. Dana Reeves received no formal sanction. Her actions, opening the car door, making the call, were found to have been materially significant to the outcome. Her failure in the first 3 seconds was documented in the record. She had put it there herself. Dana was still on the force. She was working differently now. Slower to assume, faster to check, present in a way that a source of training had not produced. She had joined the program James was building around the Caldwell standard. Not as someone being scrutinized, as a participant, sitting in rooms with community members, being asked to see people before deciding about them. She was 26. There was still time to become whoever she chose. In 6 months after the parking lot, Ryan Holt wrote Rose a letter. He wrote twice and threw both away. The third version he mailed without rereading, because if he read it again, he would throw it away too. It arrived at 4 Pearl Street on a Tuesday morning. Rose opened it at the kitchen table with her coffee. 2 pages, handwritten, careful. He did not explain himself or assign text to what Tia had done. He did not read the version that says, here is why and here is how I've changed. He wrote about Owen, 5 years old, talked constantly, trucks, clouds, whether fish understood they were in water. When he was thinking hard about something, he put his tongue between his teeth, not out but between, and stood with his eyes serious while he worked through whatever the world had given him that day. A few weeks earlier, Owen had come home with a drawing from school. Stick figure family. Too many fingers on every hand, labels written in the uneven block letters of a 5-year-old. Mama. Me. Daddy. Ryan had looked at the one little daggy and gone into the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub for 20 minutes. His son had drawn him as Daddy. Oz, not as the parking lot. Not as the man standing without a badge, as Daddy. That version was still possible. Whether it stayed possible depended entirely on what Ryan did next. He wrote, I don't know what doing sorry looks like. I know what saying so looks like. I did that in the parking lot and you told me the difference. I've been trying to figure out the doing part ever since. He signed it, Ryan Holt. Rose read it twice, set it down, drank her coffee, looked out the window at the garden going gray and dormant in the January cold. She thought about it for 3 days. Then she wrote back. They met in March. A conference room at the Hargrove County Public Library. Small, fluorescent light. A table that belonged to nobody, designed to be neutral. No cameras, no James, no lawyers. Ryan arrived first. He sat on the far sulk side with his hands flat on the table. Rose came in 2 minutes later, cane clicking, moving at her own pace. He stood when she's entered. He had not planned to. It happened before he thought about it. She sat across from him, set her cane against the table, folded her hands. He sat. They looked at each other. Tell me about Owen, she said. He looked up. Why him? It's because he's why you wrote the letter. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then, he puts his tongue between his teeth when he's thinking hard about something. Not out, just between. And he stands there with his eyes serious, and you can just watch him working through it. He sounds like a real person, Rose said. He really is. Most children are. They're born that way. Then the world teaches them who counts as a person and who doesn't. She looked at him steadily. That's the thing to watch. Not what you tell him, what he teaches you do. She told him about that Tuesday. Not the facts he already knew, the inside of it. Earl. The anniversary tomorrow. The peaches. Being frightened of her own heart and not telling James because she did not want to be a burden. Driving herself because the ordinary Tuesday felt like something she had earned after 6 days at a hospital bed. You took that from me, she said. Not permanently. But you took the ordinary afternoon, the drive home, the kitchen table, the blue bowl. You replaced it with handcuffs and 30,000 strangers watching me bleed. She held his gaze. I want you to know what you actually took. Not what you did in the abstract. That's specific. Tuesday, his eyes were red at the edges. He did not look away. And then she said, you get up, you go be Owen's father, you make sure what he learns from watching you is different from what you walked into that parking lot carrying. He was quiet for a moment. Why'd you agree to meet me? He said. Because I refuse to be a story with no middle, she said. The parking lot is the beginning. I will not spend the rest of my life being the woman something terrible happened to. She looked at him across the table. I intend to be the woman who decided what happened after. That is my choice to make. He was quiet. I don't know yet if you're worth the effort, she said. He looked at her. But I'm going to find out. That's why I'm here. Something shifted in his face, not relief. Something closer to the beginning of understanding. Thank you, he said, for writing back. Don't thank me yet, she said. We've been talking for 12 minutes. He almost smiled, just at the edge of it. 1 year after the parking lot, Rosemary Caldwell walked into the training room at the Hargrove County Police Department. She walked in on her own, cane clicking, back straight. 12 new officers sat in rows. First month of training, young faces that had not yet been fully shaped by the work ahead of them. James was in the back of the room, leaning against the rear wall in civilian clothes. She had told him not to come. He had come anyway. He could not make himself invisible, too tall. Posture of a man who had run rooms for years, but he was trying. She looked at him. He looked back. She shook her head slightly. He stayed. She set her cane against the table at the front of the room. She did not introduce herself. She did not explain the investigation or the Caldwell standard or any of it. She said, I have one question. I want you to actually think before you answer. The room went quiet. If you pulled into a parking lot today and saw someone loading groceries into a car that seemed nicer than you'd expect from that person, what would happen inside you? Not the procedure. What would happen in the first 3 seconds before any official decision? Nobody answered immediately. Good. A young man near the front raised his hand carefully. I'd notice, he said, the difference between the person and the car. Yes, she said, you would. Everyone does. That noticing is not the problem. It isn't something to be ashamed of. It's the result of thousands of messages absorbed over a lifetime. She looked at him. What you do with it in those 3 seconds, that is where everything is decided. She picked up the photograph from the table beside her. The registration card, her name on it, face up on the asphalt. She held it up so they could all see it. This was on the ground, she said. In plain view, my name, the plate number. Everything needed to understand the situation in under a minute. She looked at them. An officer stood over it for 20 minutes and chose not to read it. He was not a monster. He was a man who had decided before he arrived what he was going to find. And everything he encountered after that, my cane, my groceries, my face, my registration on the ground, he ran it all through a decision he had already made. She set the photograph down. I am 69 years old, she said. I had heart surgery 14 months ago. I drive a silver car my son gave me. My name is Rosemary Caldwell, and I live at 4 Pearl Street. And every August I buy peaches because my husband loved them, and he has been gone 5 years. She looked at each of them in turn. That is who I was when I pulled into that parking lot. All of it. Not a description on a rodeo call. A person with a history and a name and an ordinary Tuesday she was in the middle of. She let it land. Every person you stop is carrying something like that. A reason they are where they are. A day they were in the middle of. She picked up her cane. Your job is to see them before you decide about them. I know that's not small, but it is the ask. She looked at James one more time. His face was doing the thing it did when he was working hard not to feel something in a room full of people. She had known that face since he was 8 years old. She looked back at the 12 officers. Question, she said. Every hand in the room went up. She drove home at 4:15. The August light was doing what does in the last week of the month, going golden and slow, the kind of light that makes everything look like it chose to be there. Like the afternoon arrived at this hour on purpose and decided to stay a while. She turned onto Pearl Street, pulled into the driveway, sat for a moment with the engine off, listening to the car settle. The garden needed attention. It always did by late August. Things growing past their welcome. The yard insisting on its own preferences, regardless of what she wanted from it. She had always liked that about it, liked anything that insisted on itself. Tomorrow. She would deal with it tomorrow. She got out of the car, cane first. Then herself straightened up, adjusted her cardigan. A different one, not faded blue, the one James had given her last Christmas, still holding its color. She went inside, set her purse on the table by the door, walked to the kitchen. There was a paper bag on the counter beside the blue bowl. James had come for dinner the night before and left it without ceremony. Set it down, poured himself water, sat at the kitchen table, like he had been sitting at that table his whole life, which he had. He brought peaches every week now. He had been doing it for a year. He never said anything about it. Just brought them. Held it for a moment. The skin was warm from the afternoon light that came through the kitchen window every day at this hour. She thought about Earl, about the sound of him at this sink, juice on his wrist, eyes closed. The complete and uncomplicated satisfaction of a man who knew how to be present for something simple and good. She thought about the blue bowl, which had sat on this counter for 31 years, about the peaches they had ever bought together at the Route 9 farm stand the summer they moved into this house. And they were young, and young meant something particular about what was still ahead of them, she thought. I am still here, she thought. So is everything that matters. She stood at the kitchen sink on Pearl Street, and the August light came through the window, and she was 69 years old. She had been handcuffed in a parking lot 14 months ago and spent 2 additional nights in the hospital, and been watched by 30,000 strangers. Sand sat across a library table from the man who had done it and told him the truth about what he had taken from her. She had built something. Her son had built the structure of it, the policy, and the board, and the training, and the name. She had given rising and the shape and the understanding of who it was really for. She was still Rose May Caldwell of 4 Pearl Street. All of it, every year of it. Every indignity and every morning she had gotten up anyway, every marble floor and every midnight bus ride and every small proof offered to a world that had not always wanted to receive it. All of it was still exactly what it had always been. She closed her eyes. She ate the peach over the sink, the way Earl had taught her, not rushing, letting the juice go where it went. Outside Pearl Street was a late Tuesday afternoon. A sprinkler running somewhere down the block. A car passing slowly, a child's voice calling out to someone, and then the voice of whoever answered. She opened her eyes, looked at the bag, at the peaches still in it, round and warm, sitting in the afternoon light. She picked up another one. She had things still to do.